when you're able to tell your story, there's going to be someone who sees it, watches it, who may not know who you are or knows your name, but they don't know really who you are, and they get to learn about you. And you don't know if you're ever going to be able to be on a phone call with them or a virtual call, or if you're going to see them at a meeting. And even if you see them at a meeting, there's so many people, are you actually going to run into them? So in this environment here, which I think is fantastic, by the way, you get the opportunity to show who you are, to tell your story, and anybody can consume that content at any time that they want. And if they like what they hear, they can reach out to you, and if they don't, they can just flip by it, and it's noise, and
on
keep
to the
going.
next, like Jay-Z.
Because this is what I would say is, and you know this, I'm very comfortable on any phone call.
Yeah.
I'm very comfortable on stage in front of thousands of people.
Yeah.
And the reason why is that there's that interaction, and I can see people's faces,
Yeah.
and I can feed off their energy, and I can know when to pivot. I am not comfortable in this environment, and it's just because I don't do it a lot, one. Two is, I don't know why anybody would think this is interesting.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just going to say, like, it's,
Yeah.
you know, really. And everybody has their own story, so why would someone listen to my, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I have to get over that and realize, you know, I can impact someone's life, or if someone is trying to make a decision that is a very difficult decision, maybe if they hear that, they can go through the decision tree or give me a call or whatever the case may be, and I can help them. And I will say, this is why this is important, is when you're in a leadership position, you don't know whose lives you're impacting.
Joe, welcome to the Content Studio.
Thanks for having me, John.
We have done these conversations many times over the last couple of years. It's finally good to actually have you in person. I think we've had to do this remote. We've had to try to kind of make things work. And so really appreciate you making the time to come here. And I'm excited. I mean, there's a lot that we want to cover today. You're doing a lot of stuff, but I want to go back a little bit. I thought this morning we'd spend some time on talk a little bit about your journey. I think there are a lot of people in the dental world that know you for a host of different reasons, and they may not always know kind of how you got to where you got to. They may know you in the sense of you held this position at this company or what have you, but they don't always know kind of what it took to get there. But so I thought maybe a good place to start is have you share kind of the early days of dental. Like, what was it that got you into dental from where you were?
No, thanks. And allowing me to tell my story is a big thing. Plus, there's a lot of lessons I've learned along the way, and you know, maybe someone who's listening can learn from that. But dental, right? I graduate college. I've told the story before. I think there's articles written about it. And I was looking for an internship out of college. My dad called his friend named Jim Harris, who I just saw at my dad's 80th birthday party, and lo and behold, I get an internship at Children's Hospital University Pediatric Dental Clinic. And so that's how I got into dental. Never thought it was going to be a 31-year career. And my first role was to do operations and help manage a bunch of people within the organization. After 2 months, I was hired. So now I'm actually officially employed in the dental space, which I'm responsible for, I think it was 30 hygienists, 5 front desk people. And then I was a liaison between the dentists within the organization, which was interesting because if you put yourself into those individual shoes, here's a 21-year-old kid now responsible for managing, leading these people. So you can imagine how well that was received. So after a couple months and maybe 6 months, everyone understood what was going on. My intentions were good. They knew I was learning as I was going to, so it worked out very well. 2 years into it, I'm still in Buffalo, and I'm looking to do something different, and I think Buffalo was looking for me to do something different, and decided to move to Colorado. Mm-hmm. And at the time, the distributor that I was working with at Children's Hospital was Patterson. Mm-hmm. And they knew I was moving out to Colorado, so they made a call to a guy by the name of Greg Morton. He was a regional or branch manager there, and he ended up hiring me. And I didn't know any better. I didn't know what was going on from a sales standpoint. I didn't know about dental. I just didn't, the distribution side. And he hired me into operations, and I started out selling teeth. They had tooth counters. I started out with taking orders over the phone, picking, packing, and shipping. In those days, the individual branches were moving away from being distribution centers, and they were moving into centralized distribution. But you still had some things within Denver. So long story short, I did all the operations piece, then ended up being a service coordinator. So I learned all about service, scheduling service technicians. I know nothing at this point about service. So I'm talking to service technicians on the phone, having them go to an office, and they're asking me what's wrong with the office, and I have no idea how to explain it to them. But the long story short there is that being able to respect all the service technicians, knowing the position that they were doing or the job that they were doing was so critically important in the dental office, and they knew I was looking out for their best interest, it worked well. Mm-hmm. So 2 years later, get into sales, go into equipment sales, and that's where the sales journey really took off. From there, at that time, it's 2001, and if people don't know, there was a lot of acquisitions going on. So you had Patterson Dental, which was clearly the number one distributor at that time, and you had Schein, which was essentially a telesales company. They were looking to get into full service distribution. So they ended up buying a bunch of different smaller companies. So Sullivan Dental, they bought Chatham Dental, they bought Muir Dental, and they ended up eventually buying Dentrix. So they were cobbling all these companies together. And as you can imagine, that transition, it could be a little bit of a mess. So in the late 90s, early 2000s, nobody was really going from a Patterson to a Schein in a recruiting standpoint. But the opportunity, Dean Kyle came to me, he was at Henry Schein, and said, hey, we have an opportunity of being a regional manager here, and would you be interested? And for whatever reason, throughout my whole career, my whole life, there's certain buttons that really get me going. One is a challenge. If you put a challenge in front of me, and especially if you say nobody can do it or nobody wants to do it, for whatever reason, that's exciting to me. And two is being in a position of leadership. And it's not the title or anything like that, is being able to be in front of a group of people and get them to do things and work with you to accomplish an outcome or a mission or a goal. And I've always been drawn to that. So that opportunity, going to a company that needed help and also in a leadership role, managing sales reps, managing the whole branch, or in that case, they were regions, I said, let's go. I didn't want to stay in Colorado. I didn't want to compete against the individuals that I had been working with, so that's why I went to Arizona, and I had Arizona and Las Vegas, and that was fantastic. Great people there. And I was there from 01 to 04, high growth area. I really got exposed to the DSO space there, specifically the Southwest, California, Colorado, Arizona, and that's before it's really expanded across the country. And I met a person named Kathleen Titus there. And she was, I think, one of the first DSO reps at Henry Schein. And so not only were we running the private practice business, and again, I think I'm 26 years old at that time, so I had to really win over the people that I was leading, because I'm a 26-year-old kid, and they're like, who is this? And so I went through it again. It's a kind of a common theme, and it ended up working out great. But Kathleen was the one who really talked to me about the DSO space, introduced me to the different DSO owners, and they were much smaller at that point, and really got me to a level of understanding where the DSO space was and where it was going. So it was very early at that time. So like I said, that's like 01. 04, Henry Schein calls and they say, hey, we have an opportunity in New York. We would like you to be closer to the corporate office, and with Henry Schein, that's a global office is in New York. And they said, we have a regional manager position open there. Even though it was a lateral move, it was a bigger center, bigger branch. And they said, this would be a good move for your career. And I didn't want to do it. Like, who wants to move from Arizona to Long Island? But once again, it was the challenge. I heard in an airport one day, one of my, vice presidents mentioned that New York, and sorry team, because I love you guys, was like the most unmanageable branch within Henry Schein, or center within Henry Schein. So of course you got a challenge now. Yep. You have an opportunity. I get to lead. You're in a major market. So all those things, I'm like, oh wow. And at that time, generationally, you had to move around to advance into a company. So go to New York, and they became, just like everywhere, they became family, great people. There's a couple tweaks we had to do at that time just to make sure we were setting the identity and the culture properly. But once we were all on the same page and aligned there, the team really gelled together, and it was fantastic. So 2 years into that, this goes to 06, Henry Schein is looking for their first director of sales position. They didn't have a director of sales. The business was growing. everything was coming together for Schein. They really did do a lot of great things. They invested in career development. They were really hitting their stride. They were getting totally set up with the equipment part of it, the service part of it, so the technology part of it. And they said, we want to hire a director of sales, so I have to go to Wisconsin. And people in Wisconsin are fantastic. And when I say I have to go to it, once again, I didn't want to go to cold weather, right? I didn't want to go to a bigger Buffalo. I had already left
Sounds
Buffalo.
like an NBA story, all these players that get traded, right?
Yeah. So ended up going to Henry Schein, become director of sales. And when I got there, I don't know if they really knew what they needed me to do. So I focused on, of course, the supply sales. I worked and collaborated with the equipment piece of it. And then I got conventions, right? I didn't go there to run conventions. And I know some people love conventions. I don't. But you know what? You had to do that part of the job. And the team I had was amazing. So they ran it all, and they did an amazing job. And so long story short there, after director of sales, you start moving up within the company. I became a zone manager, became a area director, so I had the West Coast, and then became an area vice president, which I had half of the country, and then I went East Coast to vice president, and then ultimately became vice president of sales of the U.S. dental business. And that's really the journey that happened at Schein there.
So a couple things. There's a common thread. You mentioned it, whether it be the first position that you took and being young and having to figure things out there, and then having to figure things out at Patterson, and this kind of like figuring things out along the way. Where does that come from? Like, as you know, Joe, as you've seen in your journey, there are people that face those challenges and with the unknowns, either lean into them, not knowing kind of what could happen, and then those that can run from that. So is there anything that just in how you grew up, or kind of, as you've learned about yourself of what you're made of, that where you chose to lean into those unknown situations versus running away? Yeah.
So my family's amazing. My parents were very supportive. My mother passed in 2018, and we can talk about that later. But my dad has also always been my rock, and he was very consistent and steady. So we didn't move around a lot as a family. But I am a middle child. And I think all of what comes with a middle child is real. And I was never scared to take a risk. I'm definitely not risk averse. And I always wanted to continue to challenge myself. And whether it was mostly in sports, I grew up playing sports a lot. And that's where it comes from. So when moving from Buffalo to Colorado didn't scare me, it excited me. Moving from Colorado to Arizona didn't scare me, it excited me. So it's just who I am from a behavioral standpoint, or what's inside of me, that allows me to continue to take risks or tackle challenges that maybe other people don't want to do. And that's what I would say, John, too. And this is going to sound funny, and I'm probably going to use a lot of sports analogies, but it's legit here. When you're willing to do things that others don't want to do, you can get ahead in life. It takes some effort. It takes some hustle. It takes some, you have to be able to grind things out. But there's a lot of people out there that don't want to move. They don't want to take certain jobs that they may feel are beneath them. They don't like being challenged or feeling uncomfortable because they need to be in control. And that has really benefited from me. One of the reasons why I did get the job, the director of sales position in Wisconsin, is I don't think there was many people that wanted to move there. I mean, legitimately.
Right.
So that was really helpful that, hey, I'm willing to move, and when I move, I'm all in. So when I go back to sports, and what I'm talking about is all of us growing up, when you're at a lower level, you're probably one of the best players on the team as you're advancing. But as you advance, you no longer are. And I will never be one that says I was the best baseball player in high school, or basketball player, or football player. But the interesting thing is I was always the leader, and I was always the captain. And a big part of that is I was willing to do things that others didn't want to do. So on basketball court, I wasn't the best scorer, but I was a point guard, and I played defense. And I was able to fill the gaps on what the team needed, and I was able to identify that, and I was willing to do that. In baseball, I was always a shortstop. And when you are an upperclassman, and that's your position, the last thing you want to do is give that up to an underclassman. And our senior year, we had an underclassman who was really good at being a shortstop. I think we were neck and neck, and maybe he was even a little bit better. But being the senior, I raised my hand and said, I'm going to go to center field. We need a center fielder. I was decent at that, and ended up leaving the position I played my whole life to go to center field. So I don't know how many people would be willing to do that, but it was the best thing for the team. And you have to really have your ego. You have to put your ego in check. You still have to have ego. That's I think having ego is healthy, but you got to be able to be willing to do what's best for the team. So early on in sports, that's what I would do. And so I just took those lessons from sports and brought it to the business world. So when an opportunity came up in the business world and someone said, here's the challenge, are you willing to take it? It's like, yep. Do you know what you're doing? Nope. But I'm going to learn. I'm going to do it very well. Or I believe I'll do the best I can to make sure.
So I think with that attitude, at least this is what I've witnessed. People that I have met, that have known you, that have worked with you, is I think it's like you've created this wave over the years, and I think it's interesting to have you share what you just shared, which is, you start in those early days and you make those decisions to do the things that some people don't want to do. That just naturally, Joe, as you know, attracts a certain amount of people, right? You're going to have people that for whatever reason, are not going to follow that energy because it's scary to them or whatever, but you're going to inspire people. And it really feels like over the years, at every different position that you took, you inspired a different group of people that saw the value in that and wanted to follow behind you. And as I was learning more about you and having the opportunity to work with you, there was always people that would talk about they loved working for you. And it's great to hear this story because I think that it puts a lot of things together, is that true leadership, which we're going to get into a little bit and really kind of where that drives you, is it more often than not is about making the decisions, like you said, that other people don't want to make.
Yeah.
And then that inspires others. But along the way, safe to say that you have inspired people that have then gone off and become leaders?
Yeah, absolutely. Because, look, I ended this story at Schein where I was, but don't forget, I ended up leaving in 2018, and that was a very, very difficult decision. There's a lot of changes that were going on there, and so the individuals that I left Patterson to go to Schein for, Jimmy Brzezowski, Tim Sullivan, were starting to retire. So there's a transition for my cultural chain that was going on. At the same time, I mentioned before, my mother was passing away in 2018, and there was changes coming in. So new leadership was coming in, and not bad people. They just weren't the same people that I was used to. And at the same time, the industry is changing. So there's a lot of disruption that's happening in the industry. And for me, as I mentioned earlier, I'm always looking to the future. And I'm always wanting to build where the industry is going. I'm not building something hopefully the industry follows. It's the industry is going to go there. Let's build something so the industry has a good landing spot. And so that's when I ended up leaving and went to a company called Dental Whale. And a big part of that was the platform, so procurement platforms, which are common now. They weren't common then.
Right.
Putting a third-party service team on a platform because there just is not enough service, wasn't common. So there's a lot of things that were going on there from a solutions and business component that I decided to, once again, take a risk. It was a challenge. Nobody was leaving stable positions, and this is pre-COVID in 2018, that I can recall that had a good career path, a very healthy career path, to take a risk on a startup emerging company. But that's, again, who I am, and that was exciting to me. And in my mind, we have to do this because the 50-year-old model was coming to. There's going to be a lot of change happening, and we're seeing that now. Yeah. And then, obviously, in 23, decided to leave Dental Whale, and the thing was with opening my own company, Cavaretta Consulting Group, CCG, was that when I was having conversations with many different businesses, whether it was manufacturers, suppliers, DSOs, SaaS companies, so on and so forth, everybody needed help. Everybody needed help. And in my decision was, do I go to a W-2 job and help one, or do I do a 1099 and have the ability to help multiple companies? Which obviously chose the CCG and the CCG route, and it's worked out very well. But that is really important because all of those moves had risks. You start your own business, as you know, it is the hardest thing you're going to do. There is a tremendous amount of risk in there. So along the way, that was happening. So to answer your question when you said about inspiring other leaders, I've been very fortunate to be in positions where you're able to identify individuals who can be leaders or people who are already in leadership position and help them grow to the level of leader that they want to grow to. And that is very rewarding. You hear of coaching trees. You hear of coaching trees in the NFL. And that was really important to me. And the best outcome and the biggest accomplishment, I would say, is watching others that you've worked with and had a little piece in helping their success really advance to directors and vice presidents, and in this case, CEOs. I'm old enough now that I'm seeing the whole journey of these individuals. So that is really the most rewarding and component of everything that at least I've done personally.
Well, let's talk about the decision to go from second base to center field, right? I mean, that, at that time probably doesn't
shortstop.
seem...
Can we call it
shortstop? Did I say second base?
Yeah, you did.
Thank you for the clarification. I was entrenched in the story. All right, so the decision to go from shortstop to center field may seem like a little decision at the time. But I think really is a big piece of exactly what you're talking about, which is there are times when you, in order to be a true leader, there's going to be times where you want those other people to succeed versus then yourself, and that's a hard balance. It's a hard balance.
But that helped me create my own identity too. And when those moves were being made, whether it was football, basketball, baseball, the thing that I didn't say is that we may not have had, and again, this is high school. I can talk about college in a second, but we may not have had the best teams prior to our group of our class going to junior and senior. But in my junior and senior year, especially senior year, we made the state. So we were very successful. We finished first. We made the playoffs. So being able to do that sacrifice, right, or that move, allowed the team as a whole to be successful. I mean, we weren't losing games; we were winning. So obviously, that was the right choice. Right. So that identity, then it's like, okay, that's worked there. When you are now moving around to different places within the country or different positions within the organization, or the organization comes in and is saying, hey, look, this is our problem right now. I know it's not your responsibility. Will you take that on because we really need it? My identity is, yes, let's do it. And when you establish the right identity, I actually believe you have to create your identity before you can have your culture. Because you as a leader, you set the tone with your identity and what type of individual you want to be, what type of organization you want to be. The culture is everybody else understanding that identity and buying into it. And then the culture is by the team members or the players or whoever it is driving that throughout the organization without you being involved. That is how you establish culture, but you have to have that identity. And if you look at any sports teams that have been successful, the Patriots, who I'm a Bills fan, right? I don't like the Patriots, but you got to give them credit. You had Robert Kraft, the owner. You had Bill Belichick, the coach. They had multiple GMs, but really the GMs understood what the identity and the culture was. And then you had Tom Brady, who was the player. So in the locker room, he's the locker room leader. He's driving the culture. Belichick and Kraft set the identity. You could look at the UConn women's basketball team. You know, with Gino, he's the coach, but it's all the players that are driving that culture. It's not him. The Bulls, Michael Jordan, right? You have Phil Jackson, and Jordan's driving that culture. So when you look at it, when you then see GMs and coaches either leave or go into a different opportunity, and you see players getting traded or retiring, and all of a sudden that team is not as successful any longer, it's because your alignment is out of place. So whoever is setting the identity and then creating the culture and driving the culture are no longer there, things change. So that is a must. So I would say that to anybody is make sure you understand the identity of your team. Do you want to be a tough team? Do you want to be a sales team? Do you want to be whatever it is? And then you have to hire the people that fit the identity that you want, and then that's how you are driving the culture that you're looking for.
I love that. So let's talk a little bit about that in the dental space. There's a lot of focus over the years, rightfully so, on dentist and practice owners and now leaders of DSOs establishing their own identity. As you know, the dental industry is more than the individual dental practices. There's this whole industry behind it of all the companies that support these dental practices with products and supplies and tech and all of that. Where would you say the identity is for leadership in the part of the business that you and I work in, which is the manufacturers and the distributors and the companies that support the dental practices? Like, are we making great progress for the leaders in establishing their own identity? Have you found, like, over the years that people can tend to sway or find their own groups? Like, where do you think we are right now? Maybe on a scale from 1 to 5, of like 5 being a good portion of the leaders have their own identity, and 1 being we've got a lot that are still trying to find themselves.
Yeah, I think it varies. And are we talking about the whole industry, so DSOs, manufacturers, and distributors, or are we separating that?
I think we're going to separate them. I think we're going to not talk about the dental practices per se.
Yeah.
Not whether it be the individual private practice of the DSO, more or less the companies that support the dental practices.
Yeah, that's interesting. I would say, and I'm always going to go, 3.5. Let's just call it that.
That's safe, right?
And the reason why I'll say that is that there's some companies that you will see them with their leadership team, and they are close to 5. I don't think everyone ever believes they're close. That they're a 5 and perfect. And there's definitely some that are below 3.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it. And where we are in the industry today is we have had so much reorg, and if you look at all I'm going to call them the blue blood companies, there's been a lot of turnover at the top from the CEOs. And so all those individuals coming in, it's hard to place a rating because they have to have time to get their feet wet and get established underneath them. What I'm focused on is what's the identity, 1, that they're establishing truly. Yep. And then 2, what change is actually happening and how quickly that change is happening. Because they're going to want to come in and set their own identity and set their own tone. And then how quickly will that permeate throughout the entire organization, which is the culture that has teams buying in. The one thing that I have noticed, though, is, and this happens everywhere. So even when I started in the 90s, I heard before me that, hey, the industry was way better 10 years ago.
Sure.
No matter which generation I've been part of, right, or which decade I've been part of, it was always better 10 years ago, right, myself included. So today, what I am seeing is that as reorgs have happened, you have a lot of legacy individuals who bought into cultures of companies, and it's multiple companies, it's everywhere, that are no longer a part of their companies, by their choice or not. You have leadership that is changing at the top, so you have a disruption within leadership. And what I'm noticing more and more is there's a little bit of apathy right now. And I can't blame anybody, because it's like, hey, I worked at a company for 25 years, and I was reorged and no longer here. The new generation coming in, they are not wired in many ways that they're going to find one company and last at that company forever. And I think we are on the ending of that a little bit, John, right? And so I think with all that happening, and then you have social media. Sorry, I'm thinking of social media too. There you have a lot of individuals now trying to establish their own personal brands. Don't blame anybody for it, but that's what's happening. Right? Content creators, whatever, we're doing that now.
Yep.
Creating their own brands, that it doesn't feel as much like it's a team. And the love for the companies and being able to establish that, it feels like there's a little bit of apathy towards the company, and hey, I'm going to make sure I establish who I am, because who knows what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And I can't say I blame people.
Yeah.
Now, I will say that once these leaders are in place and they're able to be established, and the teams are seeing changes and all that other stuff, I do think there's an opportunity to get the love for those companies back again. Yeah. And it's not everywhere, but I've seen that.
You and I have talked about this. The pendulum in many industries swings back and forth. Yep. And so, like, we talked about these early days, the early 2000s. I came into dentistry in 2004. I remember what it was like to be a part of an organization, to be loyal, to wear that shirt with the company that you represented and be proud of that and have, build good relationships with your team and at the same time want to move up and be a good leader.
Yeah.
And then we've come to the point where you've talked about, I think, a lot of those things kind of fell apart and situations, happen to them. So it forces them to want to take care of themselves and find their own brand and their own identity. But if you're an organization now that, like you talked about, creates the good culture and has good leadership, and you have some of those individuals that maybe individually didn't have what it took to go on their own, they can end up back in those organizations. And I think kind of what you're saying is that let's just make sure that for those organizations that moving forward, that they're establishing their identity through their leadership. They're building that level of camaraderie and closeness and loyalty. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. And there's a couple pieces there. One, I never minded when there was someone that you worked with that had an opportunity to grow their career at a different company, whether it was a competitor or not. I always supported that. I didn't like it, right? Because then you had to train somebody else and, oh my gosh, all the time and effort you put into that individual. But from that individual's perspective, that's a fantastic opportunity. Mm-hmm. So I actually encouraged it, even though it was going to be more work on us or on me or the company as a person, as replacing them and, training and whatnot. But as that individual is great. The next component to that is the fact that when you have people that are looking to advance their careers and you don't either have the opportunity and the pathway for them to do it, or quite frankly, where they want to go, they've hit their ceiling, you have to have those conversations because you're looking out for the best interest of the individual. Right. And I used to have, I had plenty of those conversations, and someone would come to me and say, hey, I want to get to the next level. And the first thing is, okay, what are you doing to get yourself to the next level? Like, what are you learning? Are you on any type of task force or committees or all the, the corporate speak? What are you doing to go above and beyond? And then what is it that you want to do? What are you passionate about? Because if you're not passionate about marketing and you're in sales and you're going to go into marketing, it may not be the best thing. You may learn, but it may not be the best opportunity for you. So we have all those decision trees in place on where that individual wants to go. And that is if someone is high potential. If someone's hit their ceiling, the conversation is more so, okay, what do you want to do? And let me give you my perspective. I will never stand in your way. I think what you're trying to accomplish is going to be a challenge, just based on what I've seen. I think you need to give yourself more time in this position that you're currently in, but I'm not going to be the one promoting you into that next level. So if you're able to do that in another part of the company, or if you're able to do that in a different company, I will support that, and I actually help you do it, because I don't want to be the one standing in your way, because I may be wrong.
Right.
I may be wrong. So those were the conversations that I would have with individuals throughout the organizations, and I've had a lot of them. Yeah, quite a few of them.
How has leadership changed in dentistry from when you started and you look at the early 2000s to where it is now? And I want to talk about this and build a foundation for where I want to go next, which is talking about AI and leadership and the size of an organization moving forward and how many team members are they really going to need to support their mission and all of that. But I'd love to start with having you just talk about like how leadership has changed since the early 2000s and how it's stayed the same.
Yeah, it's changed in my mind quite a bit. You had a lot of, when I first got into leadership, there was still a drinking culture. There just was, and it still exists today. There's some out there, but you essentially build your relationships and your badge of honor if you're able to work all day, drink all night,
stay
and
up till 1 in the morning,
or longer, right? And then your next day you answer the bell and whatnot. And then even the individuals there, they were old dental guys. Yeah, and that's legit. They were literally guys, and they were. At that time, for me, they're my age now, or what I am now.
They seemed older, didn't
they? They seemed old at the time, but it really, that's who it was. And that's what the organizations and the different companies that were being acquired they were the founders.
Yeah.
So they moved into positions where they were leaders, and they were founders. Whether they were the best leaders or not, I don't know. But I still remember the Dean Kyles of the world and the John Chathams of the world. Jeff was in there too, and Tim Sullivan, and these individuals. They had a lot of wisdom to impart on you, but there was definitely more fun to it. Yeah. Plus, the social media component wasn't around. Yeah. And so today, when I look at it, you have a lot. The people are more educated, I would say, on true business. They're not dental only, and they grew up in dental. They actually have business degrees, or they understand technology, and then they grew up in a social media world, or they're dealing with PE right now. We didn't deal with the PE or in the late '90s and early 2000s. At least, I wasn't exposed to it. Yep. So there's a different level, and I'm going to say a higher. I'm not going to say quality, but a higher level of understanding of business overall. And I'm not saying one is better than the other, because what we are missing in the dental space a little bit today is the experience and that true understanding of dental. Yeah. There's been a lot of people, like I said, whether that was reorg or retiring or moving away, that experience means something. And being able to impart that wisdom on individuals about how to deal with a doctor or talk to a doctor or build an office or whatever the case may be, there's tremendous value in that. But the new generation coming in is necessary because, like you mentioned, the technology that is coming, it would be hysterical if we took the leaders in 2001, right, with the technology today, put them into the world today, and have them figure out what's going on. Yeah. That would be a comedy show.
Yeah, that in itself would definitely get a lot of ratings.
Yeah. So I'm actually very, I'm very positive about the future of the dental industry, because the leaders who are moving into these positions more and more understand and are comfortable with the technology. Yeah. And then before we go to technology, the only thing I would say to anybody is a number one thing as a leader that you have to do is, you'll hear you have to be intentional, and that's true. You really do have to connect with people. It's winning hearts and minds. And whenever I see where there's a situation where a leader's not able to lead their team because the team's not allowing it, they didn't get permission because they're not winning the hearts and minds. Yeah. And you have to spend time doing that. You don't have to be best friends. You don't have to go out drinking with them. You don't. But when you're sitting with them and you're asking them questions and you're listening to what they have to say, and then you're actually taking action on some of the things that they have to say, that's how you win people over. And I think we're in an okay spot right now, but I think we've lost a little bit of that.
Yeah, and of course, when you add technology into the component, which has caused a little bit of this chasm between the human part of it, which it's inevitable, and it's something I know that a lot of companies are trying to deal with. And of course, you throw COVID into the mix, and all of that. It's interesting talking about sports analogies and heart and minds. I was just listening to. I'm a basketball fanatic, right? So I'm out there in the yard. I'm listening to YouTube podcasts and all this stuff. Yeah. And I was listening to the guy that was talking about the New Orleans Pelicans play the Cavs last week. And, they have an interim coach. And the team, up until they played the Cavs, had won like 5-6 in a row. And the guys were playing hard for that coach. Yeah. And, it put the organization in a little bit of a tough challenge, because maybe they didn't think that he was good for the long term. Yeah. But what they could recognize was that he was, to your point, winning the hearts of the minds. Yeah. Those professional athletes, which is very difficult to get them to move in one direction. Yeah. I mean, have a lot of respect for coaches that have done it. But it's a great example. I think that he's really kind of tapped into their heart and minds where they were playing hard for him. Yeah. And good things happen. Yeah. And so I guess the next question is as we move into this technology part, is how do you first see leaders today in dentistry getting the hearts of minds of some of this younger generation, where they've got, I heard something today where it's like, if you hit ChatGPT, it's more of like a yes man than more than anything else. It's not going to challenge you. Yeah. And so some of I say the younger generation, but I think for all of us that are using these tools, like, we can feel like we're being correct when we're actually not correct. Yeah. And it's not until a coach or a leader comes in and actually, points out our blind spots or whatever. So what are your thoughts on that? Like this new future of building AI and building new leaders at the same time?
Yeah. So overall with AI, I think I'm like everybody else. One is, you better embrace it. Yeah. You better learn it. I'm not looking at it as the sky is falling by any means. And I'm looking at it as it's just the next evolution that we have to do as humans, And in the dental industry, I'll keep it to the dental industry, there's been a lot of evolutions over the years that have happened. I think this one will have the biggest impact. I'm pretty positive of that. And what I would say is, as a leader, the biggest thing is you have to make sure that the vision that you're sharing with your team and the culture, right, that you're reinforcing with your team includes AI and technology. That doesn't mean you have to be the expert on it.
Right.
So for me, for example, I'm not the expert on it right now. I'm learning, using, could get better for sure. What I am looking for are those individuals who are the experts to work with, because I need to ramp up my knowledge. I need to be comfortable with it. And then when I'm on a call with my team or talking to my team members, I need to make sure that they understand the vision. So that's the number one thing. Two is, even though AI is going to replace tasks, functions, possibly positions, like it will happen, I don't think it, at least right now, can do anything. I still think you need human beings to make it work right and point it in the right direction. So that's what I'm focusing my team on. And as a leader, I want to make sure they're understanding the direction that we're heading. When you do that, you will attract individuals who are highly talented, high potential, that if they know that you're going to embrace technology and AI, and they also have the freedom to do some of the things that they want to do, and you're not controlling all of that direction, I think that's exciting to people, and you're going to attract talent to help you work on that. And then the last thing I would say is that if we get to a situation where AI has improved with processes or some function that a human being is doing right now, and that human being, right, is going to be replaced or reallocated, that you have that discussion early. And you be upfront, you be honest, you don't skirt around it, because you're respecting that person. And that's how I'm thinking about AI today, which could change tomorrow based on how fast it's advancing. But that's how I'm looking at it with in my own business. And I see other businesses that are promoting AI, I think I believe are using AI more aggressively than I know I am. But the thing that I feel sometimes is that I do feel overwhelmed with, hey, you better do this and this and this and this and use this in AI. And all of a sudden you have 10 different directions you can go with AI. And what happens is you don't want to shut down and it becomes overwhelming. So I would tell everybody, hey, I'm in the same boat you are right now, trying to figure it out. And I'm trying to learn the next component of AI that can advance the company to the next step, that doesn't overwhelm me, and that I can communicate to the team what we're doing and why we're doing it. Because if the whole team is aligned and moving together, then you're going to be successful. I can incorporate 10 AI tools and do it poorly, and it's going to confuse people. People may leave, and you won't get the outcomes that you're looking for.
So last month I had the opportunity to sit down with Brian Kaleo for a podcast episode. And one of the things that I asked Brian, and I've been looking forward to asking you this, is that we're going to actually go a little bit before AI when I look at the software explosion that came into dentistry. Now I'm talking about the patient engagement tools. I'm talking about a lot of that software that came in, maybe we're talking like, I don't know, 2013 and in all of that, where practices started to use a little bit more automation. And what I remember, Joe, was that there was a lot of excitement for those practices with these newer technologies. But to your point, I also felt like those companies were exploding, and these practices, so what was designed in many cases to help them save time ended up not saving them time, because they were having to learn all the different new technologies in addition to what they were doing to serve patients. And one of the things that Brian said that really struck me is that we kind of looked at the future of managing this through a leadership lens is, understanding how important change management is going to be. And so it's like, to your point, you don't want to push aside these technologies that are here that can change our pipeline of processes. But then there's a human aspect of like, how do we step up as leaders, and how do we address and, like you said, minimize the overwhelm so that we can get the best out of these tools and not be paralysis by analysis. Whereas I feel like I remember hearing, I don't know about you, conversations from a lot of these dental practices being like, man, I've got these 5 different software tools and they're all telling me they can all save me time. And now I'm like, I have 5 different logins, all these different things. It's very confusing. And what was meant to be something very powerful and impactful, in some regards, I felt like kind of clogged up the wheel a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, true. So first of all, Brian's amazing, and what they're doing at Dykema and the Dykema events and the leadership. He has smaller meetings that are leadership meetings are fantastic because you're in a more intimate setting and you're able to learn on the things that we're talking about right now, and you're able to see C-suite DSOs or vice presidents and whatnot coming and learning together and sharing experiences. So what he's doing is very, very valuable. And if we have a chance to talk about conventions down the road, we can touch base on that. But that is the number one thing. So with CCG, right, one of the biggest things that we do is we are a fractional solutions company. And you are working with us because we are filling gaps for time or expertise. So time means the doers that are actually doing the work and whatever that is. And that could mean helping you incorporate a procurement platform or Pearl AI or Uptime, right? Or any of these SaaS software products. And the expertise is the ability that you've done change management in the past. So it includes understanding what's going on, then how are we going to communicate this out to the organization, who we're going to communicate it to, how are we going to measure it, what's the plan to implement it, and so you implement and then measure, and then how are we going back and seeing how we're doing, and then what we need to do to get it implemented throughout the entire organization. That's business discipline.
Right.
So I say all that because that's a big part of what we do, but my experience over 3 years now in the DSO space is there is so many new softwares and solutions that are out there that's overwhelming. So whenever we're talking to a DSO and they want to incorporate an RCM solution, we ask, what are your priorities? What are you already incorporating? And then we take them one at a time. And it's not an easy thing to do. It sounds easy the way I'm describing it, and it never works that way. Yeah. It takes a second. Because if you are going to change too many things, you are going to lose your offices, lose the doctors, lose the staff, whatever they can mean, their mind share, and you being able to lead them. Now, there are some DSOs, what I would say, is that they like being on the front end, and they like being the early adopters, and that's part of their identity, and that's part of the culture. So the offices that are part of that DSO and the doctors who have joined that DSO like that.
Right.
So you are more apt to try new things or beta test multiple different platforms in several different areas. And that takes a little bit more time because you're having to watch how is it adopted, what's working, what's not working. And then you're also communicating back to those organizations. So if you're doing 3 or 4 different beta tests, that can take up a lot of resources. So we try to shrink it back. We try to focus on a couple. We focus on the change management. And everything that you're saying, John, and what Brian said is true, is I would rather us incorporate one thing and do it well and get it done and then move on to the next. Because if you try to do too many things, it would be a problem.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that Brian mentioned is that looking back, lessons learned.
Yeah.
The DSO market has gone through a lot. Like we could talk about that later and all those changes just structurally and what that has meant for dentistry. But, one of the things that Brian mentioned is the importance of educating. I think that's one of the lessons learned is that like how do we take the time to educate the teams on how they can build that in. And you're right, like it is a challenging thing because when you have in front of you 5 different companies that have invested time and capital and all of this to bring a new product and software to the marketplace, it can be very exciting. You know, it's like my kids, like having to decide what channel to watch, when they've got 17 to choose from. Like, how the hell do you pick what you want to watch? And so I can understand from a dental practice perspective, this fear of like missing out. Like, what if we choose this one and it doesn't work and all of that, But I think that it sounds like we've been kind of called to the carpet in dentistry. We grew really fast. And we're kind of pulling back a little bit to establish what you're talking about, which is some of this business discipline. Which I feel like, and this is another thing I'd love to get your thoughts on, is that also is going to help the companies. Meaning that I feel like there's a lot of education with the companies now understanding of how to bring their product to market, how to have impactful conversations with the DSOs so that they can, if they don't get that business, maybe they learn from that and they can apply that to the next one that they work with, and it kind of helps them in their journey, which ultimately hopefully helps everybody.
Yeah, I would say there's two pieces of that. The first is, and we mentioned Brian earlier, and if you listen to him speak anywhere at this point, is he really does hit on the pain points of DSOs and the M&A activity, and a big part of it is the operational excellence of generating or improving your profitability within your organization organically, and no longer being able to buy multiple practices in the EBITDA and then put it all together. You actually have to perform now with the offices that you have. So in knowing that, that's why it is important that, especially if you're an entrepreneurial owner, that you are putting a plan together, slowing down just a little bit, and having the plan in place to incorporate and integrate the technology. Because if you don't do that, you're going to continue to struggle. Mm-hmm. And if you take the time to do it and you can increase your profitability by even a few percentage points and you're showing that growth, that's going to get the attention of PE or investors, because they want to see you continue to grow. If I'm the manufacturer distributor, their pendulum, right, and their decision trees they're there to sell. They are. They're creating a solution that they believe will help the DSO, right, or the private practice, whatever the case may be. But they're there to sell their solution, improve it when they learn about it, but to sell it. And they can't help how many different solutions are launched in Me Too's. So now you have a cluttered environment. So how are you going to stand out? And my thing to anybody is, one, if you are a solution that you have a good following and you have a good user base, I would absolutely promote that and lean on those DSOs that are using you, and a lot of them do. The second thing, though, is I would understand the pain points of the DSOs and provide additional solutions or services for that. Is, hey, instead of telling me how great it is and everyone's using it, and you get me connected technology-wise and I'm integrated, what else can you do to get the adoption in place?
Yeah.
And a lot of times we'll work with them for the adoption with any DSO that we're working on. But if we're not involved, what is that plan? And a lot of times the individual, there's someone in the office that can do that. But if not, what is that manufacturer company doing to subsidize that solution or provide that solution themselves in order to get the adoption? But I see that over and over again, is that's where the failure takes place. It's not the technology being integrated into the DSO, it's operationalizing it to making it work.
Yeah.
And so it takes some time to do that.
Do a lot of these companies, Joe, with the work that you're doing and seeing and having these conversations and attached to like what you just shared there, are a lot of companies ready to be able to add that additional layer of support that it's going to take? I mean, I know that there's that initial layer of just getting the attention and then the demos and then, some practices, implementing it and using the technology or what have you. But this whole other layer that you've mentioned, which I feel like is going to be so important moving forward, it's going to be, in many cases, the differentiator. Where are a lot of the dental companies in that part of it? That seems like a leadership piece too.
Yeah, to answer the question, are some ready? Sure, some are ready. It's the decision is, how much are you going to invest into that solution? And then if a third party can help, and this isn't promoting CCG because there's third parties out there that can do this, does it make more sense for us to contract with a third party that can do it, and whether the company's paying for that or the DSO is paying for that, whatever the case may be. This is not a new concept. Yep. But I think they're ready mentally. It's just a matter of putting the financial model together to map that out. Mm-hmm. And my thing is, I look at it as an investment rather than an expense. Because if you're going to invest in it and help a DSO with integration, implementation, and the adoption component of it, and they're using it more and more, and you can see it in the DSOs. You can see once it's a domino effect in a good way, that 10 will use it, then another 10, then 50, then 60, and if you're 150 office DSO, if you get to the 80-20 rule, that's a home run. Mm-hmm. And it only helps reinforce the stickiness of that solution within the DSO, that when your offices are using it and the DSO is becoming is generating more revenue and becoming more profitable, you're not going to leave at that point, right? You're not going to look for a different solution. The opposite is true. When you're integrating it and it's like, none of our doctors are using it. Nobody wants to use it.
Yeah.
And
open season.
I'm going to say this, it's the solution, right? It's the solution's fault. It's not.
Yeah.
It's how we operationalize it. But then that solution goes away and there's a different solution that comes in because they can do something bigger, better, faster, whatever the case may be. But if that operational component of it doesn't get fixed, whether it's internally in the DSO or externally with the manufacturer distributor helping, you're going to have the same results. It's definition of insanity.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about, I'd love to get your insight. So you're a dental manufacturer out there and you want to bring something to the DSO space.
Yeah.
And the upside, the opportunity to be a somewhat of a newer company and to have a DSO that might have 50 practices now become a customer or embrace your technology is a big win, right? It's a big, celebration time. However, could you talk a little bit about the fine line between being ready to be able to support once that DSO brings you on versus being honest with yourself of like, okay, like, do we have what it takes that if they say yes, we're going to be able to back that up with the support? Because I feel like there are opportunities for a company to be able to want to get into these large practices and groups and get their product and service in there for a host of different reasons, right? Yeah. Credibility, financial success, but maybe overlooking sometimes, are they ready to be able to support it?
Yeah, and I would put that in two buckets. So you were bringing up a new technology company. That new technology company is needing to find a DSO where, one, they're willing to beta test something new because nobody knows about it. Two, the company is willing to work very closely with that DSO on a daily basis to fix the bugs, because there will be bugs, and customize certain things for that DSO to improve the product. So they're going to spend a lot of time early on with that DSO. And so that has to happen that way. And I don't care who it is. When you're launching a new product, it's never going to be perfect. And whatever DSO is going to be beta testing that, if I was that company, I would tell them that. And what they're looking for, I would say, yes, we can do. But until it's incorporated into that DSO and you're looking at the workflows and how it all works, you don't know that until it's actually officially there. And you have to set the expectation that something's going to need to be fixed, period. When I look at established softwares that are in the market right now, they still have some of the same problems, but they have a user base and they're making money and they're able to add resources, but they're always going to run into a scaling situation. Always. You're always going to outsell, if you're successful, you're always going to outsell to the resources that you have, and something new is going to need to take place, whether it's a new technology that comes out that you have to incorporate, or you've grown so much that you have to add new support, and whether it's AI or whether it's people, you are always hopefully outkicking your coverage, and you just have to, with that customer, make sure they don't feel that. And behind the scenes, you're fixing it as fast as you can. But it happens to both. You're going to launch a software and you're not going to be ready.
Right.
Period. That's what happens. And hopefully you are communicating with that DSO ahead of time and setting an expectation. If you have that communication and you have that alignment with the DSO, they're going to give you latitude and forgiveness when something isn't working well. And that usually comes with whether it's free or whether it's a significant discount.
Yeah.
That's what you need to do when you're a new company.
Yeah. All right. I want to take a right turn. I want to go back to when you started CCG.
Yeah.
And, you touched on your dedication to leadership, your dedication to personal growth, professional growth throughout the years that would have you. But I want to go a little bit deeper, and I want to maybe have you share with everybody the side that many don't see when you are building something, and especially when you mentioned it, CCG was something brand new, something that you had never done before in your career. Talk a little bit about what some of those early months were like.
Yeah.
If somebody could get into that. I mean, I feel like you have established yourself in the industry as someone that people look to, and obviously for the right reasons. You've treated people well, you've led people well, you've learned, and when you haven't done things, you've been very transparent about it, and I think people respect you for that. What people don't always see is that when you do make the decision to start your own organization, a lot of the challenges that come with that.
Yeah.
Because you can't, as you know, Joe, when you're in those early days, you can't spend a lot of time talking about that because, quite frankly, you're looking to survive and keep your mission going.
Yeah.
What was your mindset in the early days of starting CCG?
Yeah, well, first I felt very fortunate with my working career because I worked at arguably the most well-run company in the industry at the time, and potentially still today, with Henry Schein. So I had the big company, the publicly traded company, just the structure that they had. They just had a different level, especially in New York, than anybody else had. Then you go to a startup, emerging company in dental whale, and you're doing different things, and you're having to establish yourself, right? You're not a destination. You're trying, and then you're doing something new. Mm-hmm. So everything that was happening in 2019 with the platforms and whatnot, you're trying to explain to people how this is going to benefit you. And then you don't have all the money in the world, right? Schein, you never worried about payroll.
Yeah.
And then with a new company, and you're dealing with individual people who are investing into your organization, and you're very close to them, right? You're very close to them. So in 23, I figured, okay, one is I sold my house to fund it. Two is I knew that what the need was in the industry from people who are calling me. And Ken Austin from ADEC used to say this, is people will come to you when they want a certain solution, and then you go and build it. Are they going to give you the PO? Right? Are they actually going to buy what they're telling you is a good idea? So I had to figure out what the solution was that people needed and the pain points that we could solve, and would they pay for that? Could we monetize it? So I have an amazing debt of gratitude to Carrie Strain, Libby Strain, Jeff Stacer. They were the first customer ever of CCG, and we have a 30-year relationship. And what I was explaining to them that we could do, they had a need. They weren't doing it as a favor, right? They had a need, and there was a lot of trust. So that was our first client that we were able to monetize what we were doing. And once you do that, I don't care who you are, I learn every single day, and where we started from day one to where we are now is night and day, is that you continue to build on that, and you continue to figure things out, you continue to improve, you continue to pivot, you continue to improve your messaging or your processes or your flows. So that was a big part of it. The other massive piece was who will do this with you, right? So I had people, fortunately, that going to Schein and Dental Whale that I'd worked with at both places, and after leaving, and everyone knew, it was all for the right reasons. I talked to Stephanie Schoenrock, and she was the first person to join CCG. Stephanie's amazing. Then it was, I believe, Phil Cruz was second, and then Amy Bridger. And then we had multiple people joining. Marcy was going through a transition, and she joined. And then, we had Jeff Van Hest join. And, Jeff he left a very strong position where he was at Patterson to take that risk too. So once again, finding people who have the same mentality as you, and that are willing to take risks and willing to want to do a challenge, that's crazy. And then you just go with Karen, and then Leanne, and then you can draw Annie and Candy, and then so now your team is building as you go. But those first 6 months are scary, and now you have to realize that there's nobody bailing you out. You're payroll. You're paying for everything, and you're funding it all. So I still remember at the time, as I knew in my head what all my expenses were, and when payroll was coming, and pay payroll once a month, and made sure everyone was on board. And I never missed a payroll. Not one time have I ever missed a payroll. And so fortunately, we're in a position now where I don't have to worry about making payroll. And you always think, as you can go, how many cycles of payroll can you go through before you may have a challenge, right? Because you never know what's going to happen in your business. The second piece is, I think any business owner starting up, that's their number one thing, because now you have people depending on you, but people's families depending on you. That's the biggest responsibility. I'm not going to say a burden, but that's the biggest stressor for me. And then you go into, after you go there is, how many times you wake up at 2:30 in the morning or 3 a.m. thinking, oh my gosh, I just lost all my clients. The paranoia is real. So that roller coaster, whether it's being an entrepreneur or business owner, is real. So when people call me and they're thinking about leaving an established job with insurance and 401k and potentially stock options, and they're making a good salary because they don't like what's going on, I'll lay out, hey, you want to join us? This is what it looks like. It's nothing compared to where they are right now from a financial standpoint, one. Or two, if they want to go on their own, I'll tell them, hey, what's involved? And there's a lot of people right after COVID, and let's call it 23, because that's when I started my own business. It felt like there was a lot of industry people trying to do their own thing. And you quickly realize, one, I don't know if I was able to monetize my relationships or the solution I put together was something someone would pay for. Two is, even though it sounds great to not be in the corporate culture, which I'm not talking bad about. It's tough, right? But there's like some type of freedom of being on your own. That also means you're on your own financially. There's no parachute there. And then the third thing that I've seen is that those individuals who did it, it's about a 2-year period where I think that they're able to financially sustain that. And then you see those individuals that, couldn't do it, didn't want to do it anymore, or realizing, oh my gosh, this is a lot. This is the hardest thing I've ever had to do. We'll go back into, as you mentioned, the W-2 environment. And, good for them. Because you all, at the end of the day, you got to think of, one, your family, and then two, your health. And as we get older, it takes a toll.
Some of those early days, what did you tell yourself? I mean, we talked about the sports, we talked about the leadership, we talked about your desire for challenge.
It was going to be 100% successful. I never doubted at one time. There was never, when I made the decision, I had talked to enough people. And when I made a decision to do it, I wish I wouldn't have put my last name in the business. I wish I wouldn't have called it consulting. So I wish I wouldn't have called it Cavaretta Consulting Group. That's why I go by CCG, because your last name, I didn't expect to fortunately get to the growth that we experienced. And I was looking to do like a nice little cottage business is really what it was.
A lifestyle business.
And
you could have your name on it. You didn't have to worry about scaling. I get it.
And so then there's just a different level of accountability when it literally is your name on it, right? And so anyways, I go to CCG. I never doubted for a second it would be successful, only because I felt good in the plan and directionally where we're heading. That's not an egotistical remark, but I was committed. And I was not going to do anything else. And so you burn the boats, right? That's the old saying. And then when the team started joining, and whenever team members would join, the thing I would ask them is, hey, what's your BAM, what's your bare ass minimum that you need to make in order to pay your bills, not be stressed out? Because I needed to get them to their own personal income to then stabilize before I added anybody else. And that was really important. So, but I never doubted that it was going to be successful.
How about leadership lessons or leadership attributes that you've had to tap into while building CCG that were much different than where you came from in the past?
So
because we all grow and evolve, as you know, in our own right. I mean, you can be you were a leader in some of your past positions, and there was things that you were doing, and you talked about the identity and all of that. But I feel like at times when you take these new challenges on, like, we grow and evolve, and so our leadership changes. Some of the principles have to stay the same, obviously, but anything different that you can look back on, lessons that you can draw on. Because and I'll get to this in a second, but I feel like part of the world, you talked about this with where dentistry is going, where a lot of industries is going, is that technology is going to offer many more individuals to be able to do what you did. Okay, that's not going to take away. You could be someone that starts your one-person company that utilizes AI. It grows to a certain point, and then you have an issue with a customer or a regulatory issue. You're gonna have to lean on leadership principles. But what have you learned leadership-wise that's a little bit different that you've had to tap into versus maybe in the past?
I think the big thing is the people that I would tap into. And as crazy as this sounds, and it's probably less common today, but until 2023, I never had to create my own LLC, right? Or And even though working in an entrepreneurial environment like Dental Whale, you learn a lot of different things than you learned at Schein. Until you do it, you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
So, and it's not hard to, but it's like you do it for the first time, okay, then you get your EIN number, and then the next thing you know, you got to get on QuickBooks, and then, oh my gosh, you have to get a payroll company. And so you start adding all these systems and services, and when you're an established company, you're an employee, and you're not having to create the canvas, right? You are coming off of a canvas, and I think Adam Bolt is the one who said that to me before, is you have a canvas that you're going off of that plan, and you need to execute the plan either better or tweak the plan, but it's already set up. And when you go into, like when I went to Schein, I didn't have to create a payroll system.
Yeah.
I didn't have to do my own payroll. I didn't have
You
any
focus on
input
leadership
into any
and
of the
growth.
processes and systems whatsoever.
Yeah.
So then you're getting on HubSpot, and then your Google, your Gmail, and then and you're the one setting all of that up. So you're the CRO, you're the CEO, you're the CTO, you're the CLO. I mean, all the C-suite alphabet soup. You're it. So what you do, and what I did is I would lean into those individuals who were in the entrepreneurial world who did set certain things up. Daryl Dooney, who I think is an absolute genius. I leaned on my brother and his partner Joe Ervelina because they're my financial advisors, but they also had different third parties that they've worked with in the past that set up business, and Joe set up his own business. So I was talking to business owners who've done it, and then this is why I would say it's important. And I'm not talking poorly on anything. I remember being at Henry Schein as a regional manager and going into dental offices and having insights into a dental practice and being able to explain, hey, where they may be lacking, right? Which is perfectly fine. It's data, it's in front of you. A lot of those doctors probably don't spend the time to do it, or maybe they don't take the time to do it, but you can do that. And then I would use a phrase like, hey, you're spending a lot of time working in the business rather than on the business. Never have done it myself. Never have doing it before myself. So now that catchphrase, when I hear people that are in traditional companies, which I don't blame them, and they're like, "Yeah, you're working more in the business than on the business." I'm like, "Yeah, but you don't actually know what that means. You don't until you've done it."
Yeah,
I did not know what it meant.
Yeah.
Right until I've done it. So they're no longer cliches when you have your own business. It's your life. Yeah. And do you work on the business at night and all weekend? Yeah. You sure do. And then that's where the scaling comes in, is you can only sustain that for so long. Yeah. So if you're not growing, you're dying. So that whole idea I had in my head, that's the one thing I think failure-wise I did wrong, and not failure-wise, but a misstep I took is thinking that I could run a business with only 4 people. Every step I've taken, I'm like, you know what? Do I really want to manage big organizations again? Do I really want to manage 3,000 people again? Do I really want to manage another 100 people again, and it's closer? Or, does 4 people sound good? Yeah. It sounds good until you're growing.
Yeah.
So it's a good problem to have. But that's the experience I've had. And then until you're also writing those checks and paying people's payroll.
Yeah.
And then figuring out what to do next and when to invest your money next. It's a balancing act. So tapping into those people who have done it, who are entrepreneurs who have done it. Yeah. And I also lean on heavy financial people, and I try to tap into legal when I need it, because it can get expensive. But that's how I think about it.
Yeah, and we touched on this, which is where the industry is going, and will we continue to have companies like you mentioned where they're having to operate with less people because those individuals decide to go off and do things like you did, I look at the private practice and DSO landscape, and now that I feel like it's kind of like found a little bit of its stable ground. I mean, the early days, what the perception was of DSOs, and I think I've told you this before. Like, I had an amazing experience. I worked for Mortensen Dental here in Louisville. Yeah, Dr. Wayne Mortensen was just an amazing man, and I loved that. And what I learned there was the amount of patience at scale when done right, what you can do. I saw a lot of the positive part. They built a really, really good culture. And so that was always my lens of the DSO space. Yeah. But I feel like we've landed in this spot now where you're a dental student and you have a choice. Like, do you go work for a DSO, or do you go start your own practice or become an associate and eventually maybe get your own practice? It's no different than you and I. You go to college. Yeah. Do I go start my own company, or do I go work for an established company? Yeah. And I feel like, and I'd love to get your thoughts on that, that's kind of how dentistry is becoming, at least for the practitioners. And so it's kind of falling, it's landing in a way where like we're going to be able to have some stability on that side of it. But on the dental manufacturer and supplier distributor side, like I just feel like there's a lot of things now that could change in the next 3 to 5 years. And so I wanted to kind of get your thoughts as we wrap here of where you see things going, what you're excited about, because you're in the trenches. You and your teams are in the trenches with both sides of this, the practices as well as the companies.
Yeah, so I'll answer that question, but look, every decade the industry has evolved. You can go back to infection control, right, when AIDS first came out and doctors weren't using gloves, right? And gloves come and there's, a new SKU that people are buying. Then you go into, the 90s, even the 2000s, and let's just call it film, right? And film was the number one SKU for everybody for the longest time. Nobody is buying film anymore. There's no dark rooms being built. And what you do is you adapt and adjust because digital impressioning came out. You look at, intraoral scanners came out for x-rays. And then impression material is the same thing. Now, impression material has held on pretty tight, even though it's going down. But when digital impressioning came out, impression material started, obviously, that was a category that was going down. So every decade, there is some type of thing that happens that the industry is forced to evolve. Now, margins are going down because the profitability is in the supply piece. And then what you have to do is adapt is, all right, so if margins are going down in supplies, what do I need to do? And you have, whether it's private label, whether it's your owning manufacturers, the manufacturers working with the distributors to figure out how to get more even balance between private label and branded. You go into then solutions, right? Other ways to make money. And if you're a supply-only company, you have to make a decision on, am I going to get into small equipment? Am I going to get more into full service? Am I going to offer solutions that are business solutions that can generate revenue at a higher margin? So everything is adapting as we go. So with AI, the same thing will happen. And I think with the distributors, the thing that I do believe they're having to account for, especially in the DSO space right now, is the procurement platforms, right? Just figuring out how to work in that world, because it's allowed offices to have so much more accessibility to other options that if you're an established company, you have to figure that out. It's not going to stop. So you have to figure that out. You have to think of something different. And the companies that are willing to get out of their own way and willing to take a little bit of risk to figure out what to do in the future, that they can create a solution for where the industry is going. Once again, where the industry is going. The industry is heading that way. You have to quickly figure out a pathway for them to go to you so you can be successful.
Yeah.
And I'll take it to 2013 probably. And I remember it was Kathleen Titus, Andrea Height, Keith Gauza, and they're on the West Coast, and that's where all the DSO was. And I'm in a vice president position, I think it was vice president West, and that's where a lot of the DSOs, because it was Texas, Colorado. There were pockets in the East and Florida and whatnot, but a lot of it was still in the West. And then you had an individual named Hal Muller, who traditionally ran the national DSOs. So what was going on is you had emerging, which are now emerging DSOs, we called them mid-market at the time. We're starting to actually call them, it was almost like the minor league, and it wasn't meant to be that way, but it was, it was a baseball term, but it turned into mid-market and then emerging, that you had these smaller groups that were created, that were starting to form, and you had these big discounts for the big DSOs, and you had private practice discounts, but none of the solutions made sense for the emerging market space. So identifying that, there was a few of us that got together, and it took us 18 months, and it was not easy. It was very, very difficult, but we created, I believe, what most people operate into today in the emerging market space. That there was a pricing program, there was the ability to sell to them, and then you started putting in tiers in place for their volume, and that didn't exist before. So that would be something that someone needed to adapt to. And then a couple of years later was the GPO space. GPOs really did not exist in dental. And it was more of a medical thing. And even today, the GPO space is more like buying groups than it is a true GPO in the dental space. But you had to recognize that these groups were forming and they were generating business. So if someone is going to bring you business, you figure out a solution, right, on making it the easiest way for them to give you the business, right, if you're a distributor. So then a couple years later with Darcy Wingard and Annika Swenson, you had people, we were able to put together a GPO plan. And so I think today you're going to need people who can focus on where it's going and then who are going to grind it out, whether it's using technology, whether it's using people, whether it's cross collaboration within an organization, but you need someone who's going to stick to that until it's done. Because if you don't, and if you have someone that's sticking to it, and then once it's created or not even done yet, and then someone else is going to come in and try to take it over, it won't work. Yeah. It will not work. It'll fail. Yeah. So yeah, that's what I see happening. So the manufacturers are having to reinvent themselves for sure, which is not new. And it's, hey, figuring out how to combat private label. And then the distributors are figuring out, hey, our margins are going down, and how do we do that? And you have private label. It is what it is. So the two groups have to figure out how to work together and get that pendulum in line.
All right. So the last thing I want to ask you, this has been awesome. I can't believe it's been almost an hour and a half, which is crazy. We could talk for hours. Yeah. And I'm so excited, as I've shared with you and actually kind of like berated you in all fairness over the last couple of years, to share your story more, because I know there are people out there in the dental industry that appreciate you and your leadership and your vision and what you share. And so, like, obviously, I just think it's important to do this. The last thing I want to ask you is we've talked a lot of the internal things, the mechanics of the manufacturers and the DSOs. Could you share with companies out there your version or what you think is important in regards to the stories that they need to tell? So we touched on social media a little bit, right? Like, this is a whole new level. This is a whole new element for a lot of these companies, Joe, that built their relationships and grew their businesses based off of their relationships with the distributors or whatever. We're in a world now where these companies have the opportunity to tell their story more often, more direct to the dental practices. Yeah. And so I just love to get your kind of final thoughts on this, is the importance of these companies telling their story and digging into that side of it, and your perspective on that.
Yeah, and how I think there's still a massive human element to all of this. I still think relationships absolutely matter. Yep. And when you're able to tell your story, there's going to be someone who sees it, watches it, who may not know who you are or knows your name, but they don't know really who you are. And they get to learn about you. And you don't know if you're ever going to be able to be on a phone call with them or a virtual call, or if you're going to see them at a meeting. And even if you see them at a meeting, there's so many people, are you actually going to run into them? So in this environment here, which I think is fantastic, by the way, you get the opportunity to show who you are, to tell your story, and anybody can consume that content at any time that they want. And if they like what they hear, they can reach out to you, and if they don't, they can just flip by it, and it's noise and keep going.
Next, like Jay-Z.
Because this is what I would say is, and you know this, I'm very comfortable on any phone call. Yeah. I'm very comfortable on stage in front of thousands of people. Yeah. And the reason why is that there's that interaction, and I can see people's faces, and I can feed off their energy, and I can know when to pivot. I am not comfortable in this environment, and it's just because I don't do it a lot, one. Two is, I don't know why anybody would think this is interesting. Yeah. Like, I'm just going to say, like, it's, really. And everybody has their own story, so why would someone listen to my, right? You know what I mean? Yeah. But I have to get over that and realize, I can impact someone's life, or if someone is trying to make a decision that is a very difficult decision, maybe if they hear that, they can go through the decision tree or give me a call or whatever the case may be, and I can help them. And I will say, this is why this is important, is when you're in a leadership position, you don't know whose lives you're impacting. You don't, when you're leading someone, it doesn't mean they have to be part of your company. Yep. Right. And then, two is when you're leading people, being transparent is very important. And when I was at Schein, I'm a very private person, as you know, and my personal group is very tight. It's family, and then there's a few people that I'm friends with, right? And it's not intentional, it's just who I am. In my work environment, I made a decision early on that I was going to share the experiences I was going through. So I've been through a divorce. I've gone to therapy. I've had my mother die and she had Alzheimer's, right? And dealing with all. I've moved, right? I've raised kids in a co-parenting situation. So I wouldn't share that with everybody, even though I just did right now. But with my leadership team, I would let them know what I was going through. So they felt bad for me. At the end of it was, so if you're going through this, call me.
Yeah.
So our one-on-one calls, in many cases after I shared that, was less about the business.
Yeah.
It was more about them.
Yeah.
We'd always get to the business. But since there was a connection, whatever I would ask them to do, even if they didn't agree with it, like it, whether it was a tough thing, it was getting done because we were connected.
Yeah.
So that's the thing I would say, and that's why I'm doing this. Yeah. I struggle with it, John, and I appreciate you sticking with me.
Well, I think here's what I'll say. It's, I mean, you mentioned it.
Yeah.
If you were a leader in a dental company,
yeah.
and you had the opportunity to be in front of a room, Joe, of just 30 people.
Yeah.
Okay, so just imagine if you had 30 leaders in a DSO or an office manager in a dental practice that makes buying decisions or what have you, and you were only able to get 30 people in a room and be in front of them live and share with them who you are and a little bit about your company and how you can solve challenges. Like, I would say, that's pretty, a lot of people would take up on that, right? You would, in many cases, people pay for those opportunities, okay? When you create a piece of content and you just shared it, and if only 30 people watch it,
yeah,
it really is the equivalent, which is, it blows people's mind because they like to compare a lot of this to the influencers of the world that get millions of views or whatever. But if there's a trend that's happening in the business space, especially in B2B,
yeah,
it's that companies don't need as many people to watch this.
Yeah.
And so my hope is that it's lowering kind of the heat in the room for exactly what you just shared, that they can take a deep breath and say, okay, they could speak to this. And all it takes is one person to be able to see that, to be able to make a change, or your words impacted them. And so, that's why I'm glad that you've decided to do this. Yeah. I've known this because I've had the opportunity to work with you.
Yeah.
And so I've known, and I was going to push you until you kicked me out of the room to say, Joe, I'm getting your ass on camera because I think there's a lot of people that appreciate it.
Yeah.
And even though you have, had success, which did not surprise me at all with CCG, I think there's so many more that you can help because I think the industry is going through a lot of changes.
Yeah.
And I think leadership, which I'm glad we touched on, and we're going to talk on more today, like some of your principles. I think more and more companies are going to need that.
Yeah.
And so I'm glad we did that. But anyways, thanks for your time this morning.
No, this is great. Thank you. I appreciate it, John.
You got it.
Yeah.
All right. See you, bud.
See ya.